And it's going to ask you all to verify that you're okay with that. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Wonderful. Yay, I'm so happy about that. Okay, wonderful. We're so excited that you are all here tonight for this very special Torah study. We wanted to welcome everybody. I'm Shoshana Fisher. I'm the VP of Marketing and Communications for Pacific District. And joining me tonight is my tech partner, our VP of Development, Julia Weinstein. We've got just some reminders about Zoom. Some of you might be more familiar with it than others. So we want to make sure that you know what to do and how it works. We're going to ask you all to be on mute, again, to make it easier to hear each other. Please use the chat because we want to make sure that this feels like we're all together in the same place. There's going to be multiple times tonight where there'll be a chance for you to ask a question. We ask that you raise your hand by clicking reactions so that we can see that your hand is up. Otherwise, it will be hard to see you if you're waving your hands in front of your camera. We do want everyone to have a chance to contribute. So if someone has an observation that you agree with, you can give it a thumbs up or give it a heart or mention it in the chat. This way we make sure that everybody has a chance to contribute and talk, because it is a rather lengthy parsha tonight. And as I mentioned, we're going to be looking for English readers tonight. So when Nancy asks for volunteer, you can virtually raise your hand and Julia or Nancy will see you and call on you. As far as the chat, you can make sure to chat. You can chat to everybody. If you want to chat to someone specific, just make sure to put their name in the drop down. Otherwise, it will go to everyone. And if you're having any tech issues, please let Julia know outside of Helene's camera. Sorry about that, Helene. But if you have any other concerns or issues, we can try to fix that if possible. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our leader for tonight, Nancy Marcus. Nancy served as WRJ Pacific District President from 1994 to 1996. She served on the—
You're freezing.
Oh dear. Is that better? I'm going to turn off my camera. See, Helene, it happens to other people too. Let me turn off my camera. There we go. How's that? Better? All right. Nancy served as WRJ Pacific District President from 94 to 96 and served on the WRJ board 3 different times as a board member, executive committee member, and secretary. She's a member of Temple Bat Yam in Newport Beach and Temple Emmanuel in San Diego, where she is now living. She has 2 children, Deborah, the rabbi of Temple Emmanuel in San Diego, and David, who lives with his wife, Diana, and her 2 grandchildren, Kayla and Ari, in Columbus, Ohio. She loves seeing her grandchildren. The best thing about her involvement in sisterhood is the friends she's made here at home and all over the country. Nancy, you're—
Thank you. I keep losing your sound. What's a minyan? It's 10 Jews meeting together for prayer. Some of our blessings require a minyan. Where did the number 10 come from? Well, according to our stories, our midrash, Noah and his family were 8, and that was not enough people to prevent the great flood. Later, Abraham bargained with God to save the wicked residents of Sodom and Gomorrah, and he knew that 8 was not enough. So he started out at 1,000 and he kept negotiating down until he arrived at 10. Now, unfortunately, Abraham couldn't find 10 good souls in Sodom and Gomorrah, so the town was destroyed, but that number of 10 became our number for a minyan. Tonight, we are studying Torah for the 11 who cannot. They were a minyan plus 1. We say the blessing for study for 11 who cannot. They were a minyan plus 1. We honor the memories tonight of 11 Jewish souls who went to services to ensure a minyan at their temple and were lost to a mindless shooter 3 years ago today, October 27th, at Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Tonight, by our presence here, we remember and honor Joyce Feinberg, Richard Gottfried, Rose Mallinger, Jerry Rabinowitz, Cecil Rosenthal, his brother, David Rosenthal, Bernice Simon, her husband, Sylvan Simon, Dan Stein, Mel Wax, and Irving Younger. May the minion plus one always be a blessing to those who knew them and those of us who honor and remember them tonight. As we recite the blessing for study of Torah, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav b'tzivanu, la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, who commands us to engage in, to wrestle with Torah. And that is what Torah study is. It is rest in our Torah. Tonight we are studying Parashah Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah, and every Torah portion in the women's commentary begins with an outline. If you're using your own commentary, we are on page 112. We also have the commentary on the screen for you. When our district president, Cher Kritchmar, called and asked me to teach this Torah study tonight, and I told her what the Torah portions was, I said there just are no accidents in Torah because we are commemorating the death of the 11, and our portion starts with the life of Sarah, which really is the death of Sarah. So no accidents. If you're looking at the outline, this Torah portion is divided into 3 distinct stories. The first part tells the story of Sarah's death and Abraham's plan for her burial. The second part tells us the story of Abraham sending his servant Eliezer to find a wife for Isaac. The final part, this is the one we never get to, and it's so intriguing, tells us the story of Abraham's remarriage and second family. The final part is seldom studied because the first 2 command our attention. Tonight will probably be no different, but we'll try. If we run out of time, you can read this on your own and learn about Abraham, Keturah, and 6 more children. One other thing, when we read, if you have a question, write it down or put it in the chat. Julie is going to be monitoring the chat. We'll try to get to as many as we can. By the way, in Torah study, we call a question a koshi, something that catches your attention. It's mysterious. It doesn't make sense. So if you see any koshis, let us know. So let us begin tonight at the very beginning. Do I have a volunteer to read verses 1 and 2 on page 113?
Mary raised her hand.
Perfect.
Sarah lived to be 127 years old. Such was the span of Sarah's life. Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham proceeded to mourn for Sarah and to bewail her.
Does anyone have a question on these first 2 verses? Let me see if I can ask you a question that'll generate an answer. Who is not there? Who's missing?
Isaac.
Right. Sarah dies, and there is no Isaac. We'll have to see what's significant about that. Okay, you can put your hands down unless you have a different question. Okay, Becca, did you got your question? Dana, do you have a question? You have to unmute.
Mine was up just to offer to talk.
Oh, okay. Dana?
I just said, why 127 years? That always perplexes me when they give the or ages.
We don't know. But yes, they do. They seem very bizarre to us. Okay. So we need a volunteer to read verses 3 to 20.
I have Dana next. I wrote down Dana next, and then Nancy Silverman, then you, Rebecca. How's that?
Sounds great.
And then Honey, if Honey raised her hand.
Okay, thank you.
Then Abraham rose up from upon his dead wife and spoke to the Hittites, saying, I am a foreigner living for a time among you. Sell me a gravesite among you, that I may bury my dead here. The Hittites answered Abraham, saying, Hear us, my lord, you are a mighty prince in our midst. Bury your dead in any of our choicest graves. Not one of us will keep you from burying your dead by withholding the gravesite from you.
Okay, we need to, yeah, there we go. Next page.
Okay. Abraham then got up and bowed low to the people of the land. The Hittites pressing them, if you really are willing to let me bury my dead here, listen to me and entreat Ephron, son of Zohar, for me, and let him sell me the cave of Machpelah. He owns it. It is at the edge of this land. Let
Next slide.
him sell it to me as an inalienable gravesite in your midst at the market price. Ephron himself was sitting among the Hittites, and in the hearing of all the Hittites and all the town leaders, Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham, saying, No, my lord, listen to me. I am giving you the field and the cave that is in it. I give to you in the sight of my people. I give it to you. Go ahead, bury your dead. Next slide. Abraham listened to Ephron, and Abraham weighed out for Ephron the amount of silver he had named in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver using weights, standard among traders. So Ephron's land in Machpelah, looking out on Mamre, I'm not sure if that's how you say it, the field, its cave. Next slide. And all the trees in the field within its boundaries passed to Abraham by purchase in the sight of the Hittites and of all the town leaders.
Okay, and are we at 20? No,
Now,
quite.
afterward, Abraham buried his wife, Sarah, in the cave of the field of Machpelah, facing Mamre, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Do you want me to read 20?
20, yes.
Thus was confirmed Abraham's acquisition from the Hittites in the field and its cave as a fully owned gravesite.
So this is a little curious. Why do you think Abraham refuses the Hittites' offer to let him bury Sarah in their graveyard, in any grave? They offer him any grave he wants. He is a wealthy man. He's a well-respected man in the community. Why do you think he refuses?
He
The
wants to make sure that no one can later say that it was not a real transaction.
Okay, any other thoughts? Nancy Silverman? You're muted, Nancy, unmute.
I was just gonna say he didn't want any complications. He wanted it to be a clean deal. So
Okay. Honey? You're muted, honey. You have to keep muting and unmuting. Honey, you stuck on mute.
I think Honey's frozen, but
Yeah.
Sandra had her hand up. Sandra, there.
Yeah, I believe that he knew that for eternity, the land would be owned by the Jewish people. And that was extremely important to him.
Okay, honey, now you're unmuted.
I think he wanted a special place for her to be buried because she was an important person to him as well as to our nation.
Amy?
Still on.
It also states here that Sarah's grave is the first permanent legal presence in the land promised to Abraham and their descendants. So that was going to be the start of them having their own land there.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
I don't know how to raise my hand. May I speak?
That's okay, Helene, we got you. Go ahead.
We have an obligation in Judaism, which probably starts with Abraham making this purchase, that we bury our own dead. He never wanted it said, Abraham never wanted it said, that the burial was not something he did for his beloved wife. And therefore, having taken the grave would be much more inconsequential than actually paying for it.
Okay. And I cannot see anyone else. I don't know if you can, Julia, who has a comment or a question.
Nancy has her hand up again. She's muted.
Okay.
No, my hand was just remained up because I answered the previous question.
Okay, so it just didn't come down yet.
Yeah.
All right, so I think everyone is on the path that occurred to me, which was that Abraham wants to own this land. That's very important, that it not be the land that belongs to someone else that he has been given. So he physically wants to. So then I still have another question. Where is Isaac? He's still not here. Don't have an answer yet. And then, do you think that this practice started by Abraham has contributed to the practice that we follow to this day, ourselves in death? We have Jewish cemeteries, or we have Jewish sections in large cemeteries, but we have always this practice separating ourselves from the general community, even in death. Any thoughts on that before we move on? Anne Brandt, I see your hand. Unmute yourself.
Well, it's my understanding that when Jews settle in an area, even before a synagogue is built, the cemetery has to be taken care of. And I've heard about this over and over again. First, the cemetery is taken care of, then the rest of the communal buildings would be made.
That's a very powerful thought. It is, and I've heard the same thing. It's like you have an obligation to build a school before you build a shul. Anyone else? Okay. We are going to move on to section 2, Isaac and Rebecca, which is on page 116.
And,
This is
and Nancy Silverman can read that. I think she's up
Okay.
next for reading.
Nancy, I want you to read verses 1 to 9.
Okay.
I'm not on it. We're on Genesis.
24.
Okay. Abraham was old, well advanced in years, and Adonai had blessed Abraham in every way. Abraham now said to his slave, the elder of his household, who had oversight of all that was his, put your hand under my thigh so that I may have you swear by Adonai, God of heaven and God of earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from among the daughters of the Canaanites, in whose midst I dwell. Rather, you shall go to my land, my birthplace, and get a wife for my son Isaac. The slave replied, suppose the woman doesn't care to follow me to this land. Should I then bring your son back to the land you came from?
Okay, next slide. We need the next slide.
Did it not
Yeah.
advance?
Shauna's internet's a little slow.
Okay.
Can you not see it?
Abraham then answered him, take great care not to bring my son back there. Adonai, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house, from the land of my birth, who spoke to me and promised me, saying, to your descendants will I give this land, will send a divine emissary before you, and you shall take a wife for my son from there. But if the woman does not care to follow you, you are released from this oath of mine. Only do not bring my son back there.
Okay, we've got one more little verse.
It's coming. It's coming.
There it is.
The slave placed his hand under his master Abraham's thigh and swore to him concerning this matter.
Questions? Anyone have a question? Sandra? Unmute.
Question is, why under the thigh? Was this a tradition that we had had for a long time, or where does it come from?
My favorite little tradition. According to rabbis, not me, but according to rabbis, the most valuable part of the man was the scrotum. And you wrapped your hands really not under the thigh, but around the scrotum to make these vows, because that was a really serious vow when you put your hands on the man's scrotum.
That now makes so much sense.
Yes. Yeah. And I think I first learned about that many years ago when we were studying Jacob and his final gifts, if so to speak, to his family when he's doing his death speech. But yeah, and I thought, oh, well, that's an interesting thing to know. So anyone else have a question there?
Anne Brandt had her hand up,
Okay.
and Flo Cohen also.
Okay.
Okay, I was thinking of Jacob also, but I was thinking when Jacob wrestled with God, and then he became lame under his thigh, and so that was my reaction to it. I didn't have your explanation.
Okay. And Flo Cohen. Hello.
I want to know why he said, don't bring Isaac back to where I was. He doesn't want him taking a wife from the Hittites, but why, if he sent the slave back to get a wife, why would he not let his son go back there?
Okay, I'm holding it. I'm going to answer. Esther, question?
My question is there any correlation as to why it's sometimes suggested that us Jewish persons don't eat the chicken thigh?
No, we eat chicken thighs. We don't eat chicken wings. We can eat thighs. All right, so
Lisa has a question. Lisa Wise-Wolk had a question about the color of the font. You're muted.
I wrote into the chat, why are some words on your slides here blue? Are they for emphasis, for further discussion, or just to say, hey, something's blue?
Yep.
oh, I don't know why.
Okay.
Can't give you an answer. All right, so we had a question. And does anyone have any thoughts about that question that I didn't answer yet?
Yes.
Why we're not going to go, why Isaac shouldn't go back to where Abraham and Sarah came from? Any thoughts?
Yes.
Okay, let's hear it.
We're not supposed to live in the land he's from. We're supposed to live in the land that God gave us.
Yes.
So if he goes back there and finds a wife there, he will more likely stay there. And we're not supposed to establish the Jewish land there.
Thank you, Becca. I think that is the answer. He was not supposed to go back. They had left. It was a one-way trip, if you will. Honey, question or comment?
And I was going to read.
Okay, all right. We are ready for verses 10 to 14.
Well, Rebecca is next for reading and Honey will follow Rebecca.
Great, okay.
All right. The slave then took hold of 10 of his master's camels, and laden with an abundant store of his master's goods, got up and went to Aram Naharaim in the city of Nahor. He made the camels kneel down outside the city at the water well at eventide, at the time when the girls who draw water go forth. And he prayed, Adonai, God of my master Abraham, please bring me luck today and do a kindness for my master Abraham. Here I am standing at the water fount, and the daughters of the townspeople are going forth to draw water. The girl to whom I say, tip your pitcher and let me drink, and who replies, drink, and let me water your camels too, let her be the one you have designated for your servant Isaac. That is how I shall know that you have done a great kindness for my master.
Okay, so Eliezer concocts a test to help him find a wife. So what is that test that he's going to give?
He wants her to be kind and generous. Even though he does not know her, she should want to help others.
Right, he's looking for very specific qualities in this potential wife for Isaac. Why do you think he's schlepping all this stuff on camels that Abraham has loaded up? What's the purpose, do you think, of all the stuff that's being schlepped?
Bride price.
Hey, bride price, what else does it show?
Wealth.
Okay, Anne?
Same answer, sorry.
Okay, anyone else? Honey, did you have a question?
No, I think he wants to show that there is wealth in the family and that they will take care of the girl.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that a big part of it is to demonstrate that Abraham, who has left, has been very successful in his new home. And that's also evidenced in the prior section when he paid 400 shekels of silver for the cave. That was a lot of money. All right, so we'll have a new reader. We're going to do verses 15 to 28. It's going to be a whole bunch of slides. So Shoshana, we're going to try to not make you crazy.
Okay, and Flo had a question, Nancy.
Okay, I'm
in the
sorry. Flo, I
chat.
didn't see your hand.
In the chat.
Okay.
Flo is muted.
All right. Flo's question.
It goes back to the last part.
Okay.
If he didn't want Isaac to go there, why did he want a wife from there?
Well, I think that's because it was family.
Ah,
You know, that's where he was from. So I think he, in his mind, you bring family. You look for Mishpucha.
At that point, probably, I'm the one who's married to my cousin, so I sort of get it. But were anybody remember him all these years later?
Well, we're going to find out.
Okay.
As we read, are now going to find out.
Okay, Rebecca Bierman is the next reader.
Okay, Becca.
I did just read. Did you
Oh,
want
she just
to
read.
continue?
Oh,
Or is it
okay,
Honey's turn?
then Honey is up. Thank you, Becca.
Not a problem.
Before he was done praying, Rebekah, who had been born to Bethuel, son of Milcah, wife of Abraham's brother Nahor, was going forth with pitch on her shoulder. She was an exceedingly beautiful girl of marriageable age, whom no man had yet known. She went down to the spring, filled the pitcher, and went up. Waiting for more.
That's coming.
I should have grabbed my book.
No, it's my fault. My computer's stupid. Did it catch up yet?
The slave ran toward her and said, "Let me sip a little water from your pitcher." And she replied, "Drink, sir." Quickly, she lowered her pitcher on her hand and let him drink. The drinking done, she said, "I will draw some for your camels too, till they are done drinking." Quickly, she emptied her pitcher in the trough, and she ran to the well to draw water, drawing water for all of his camels.
Okay, there'll be another slide up in a minute.
Okay.
Okay, and after this slide, I'll share screen for the next one. How's that?
Okay.
Okay, should I go ahead?
Yes, go ahead, honey.
The man stood staring at her, silent, in order to learn whether or not Adonai had cleared the way for him. When the camels were done drinking, the man took a gold nose ring, a half shekel in weight, and 2 bracelets for her wrist, 10 gold shekels in weight, and said, "Please tell me, whose daughter are you? Is there a place in your father's house for us to lodge?" She said to him, "I am Bethuel's daughter. He is the son of Milcah, who she bore to Nahor." And she added, "We have straw and fodder in abundance, as well as room for lodging."
Okay, I'm going to take over screen share now.
Okay.
Okay. All right, can you see it?
Yes. Do you want me to continue?
Yes.
Okay, the man kneeled and bowed down to Adonai, saying, Blessed is Adonai, God of my master Abraham, whose faithful kindness has not deserted my master. As for me, Adonai led me straightway to my master's brother's house." The girl then ran and related these things to her mother's household.
Okay, we're going to stop right there for a minute. Rebecca seems to be the answer to Eliezer's prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you think the purpose is of the nose ring and the bracelets? Any thoughts, honey?
Again, to show riches, to show generosity too.
Okay, so he's showing Abraham's generosity,
Right.
really.
Yes.
Any other thoughts?
Why a nose ring?
Why a nose ring? I have no idea, other than I gather it was a sign of,
Well,
yes.
serves no useful purpose other than wealth.
Oh, decoration.
Yeah. Yes. So
Could it be kind of like a way of showing that she's now taken?
that's what I was kind of wondering, like an engagement ring.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a way of marking her that she's been selected. It's an open-ended question. There is no answer given. So we have speculation. We have lots of ideas. All right, we are going to continue with verses. The next piece is 29 to 41.
And
And
Karen
Rachel is going to
Goldberg,
take Eliezer home.
Karen
What,
Goldberg
new
has
reader?
offered to read.
Perfect.
Just because I have a book, so I don't have to rely on the slides.
Okay.
Okay, so verse 29. Now Rebekah had a brother named Laban, and Laban ran outside to the man at the spring. When Laban saw the nose ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrists and heard his Rebekah say, "This is what the man told me," he went to the man who was still standing by his camels at the spring. "Come in, O blessed of Adonai," said he. "Why stand outside when I have cleared the house, also made the camels?" So he ushered the man into the house, unsaddled the camels, and gave them straw and fodder, and brought water in to wash his feet and those of the men with him. But when food was put in front of him, the man said, "I will not eat until I have had my say." He, Laban, said, "Speak." "I am the slave of Abraham," said he, "and Adonai has blessed my master exceedingly and made him rich, giving him sheep and cattle, silver and gold, male and female slaves, camels and donkeys. Sarah, my master's wife, bore him a son in her old age, and my master has given him everything he owns. My master adjured me, saying, 'You must not choose a wife for my son from among the daughters of the Canaanites in whose land I now live. Go rather to my father's people, to my relations, and take a wife for my son.' I said to my master, 'What if the woman will not follow me?' He answered, 'Adonai, before whom I have walked, will send an angel with you who will clear the way for you. You will take a wife for my son from my clan, from my father's family. You will be free from your obligation only if you go to my relations and they refuse you. In that case, you will be free from your obligation."
Thank you, Karen. So we have this curious event where Abraham has sent Eliezer. Eliezer has found Rebekah, and now he's explaining to Rebekah's family why he is there. And he's very nicely demonstrating Abraham's wealth and what a good catch Isaac is going to be. Any thoughts on any of this?
I'm not sure. Maybe it's because of the way we run our lives now, but I'm not sure that I would accept somebody if I'd never seen him. I would think in the back of my mind, he might not be too good if they didn't even bother to bring him with them. I know that on the other side, they're saying that they're afraid he'd stay there, but it's like, she's like kind of being bought and not knowing who her owner is going to be.
It is a very curious thing, especially if we look at it through the eyes of our modern eyes.
Yeah.
It's really peculiar. Flo, did you have a question or comment?
Yes, a question. It's not like people were able to communicate with each other. When Abraham left, he was probably gone. There was like in the old days when people sailed away from Europe. How did those people know about Adonai?
How did the family?
Yeah, how did Abraham's family, after he struck the idols or destroyed them, but it's all these years later, how would they have known about Adonai? Or is that just one of the things we take for granted as we read this?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say, Robin, let's hear what you have to say before I say anything else.
This isn't related exactly to Flo's comment, but I was struck by how transparent Eleazar was. He really laid the whole thing out the way it was presented to him. He didn't try to be sneaky or anything. And so, I mean, she knew that she had the possibility of refusing and probably wouldn't suffer consequences for that.
That's probably correct. Yes, I agree with you. So how did we get into this crazy thing? How do they know about Adonai? I think we couldn't presume that when Abraham left, he had told the family about his beliefs and why he was leaving. I would just assume that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that wouldn't come as a shock to them. But even if without the whole Adonai issue, they knew Abraham left with Sarah and they moved to Canaan. And now they're coming back for a wife for their son. So even without God, would it be unusual to go back to your family to try and get a wife rather than a Canaanite? Because you know the ites are not good. In Torah study, the ites are always a problem. Whether it's the Hittites or the Canaanites, doesn't matter, they're always a problem. Evelyn, did you have something?
Well, I was going to say, Eleazar was talking about Adonai, not really the family, and he said Adonai, the God of my masters, so they just took it at face value. Adonai is the God of your master. Okay. I don't think there was anything about that. And, well, we'll see in a few minutes, but...
Okay, well, yeah, we're going to move on then. We're going to read verses 42 to 58 next.
Do we have a volunteer?
And as we're reading, pay attention to the repetition. They say that there is not a wasted word in Torah, so it has to be important. So see if you have an idea about what the repetition is and why it's important.
Anne, I think you have your hand up, and then Evelyn, I think you might have said it as well. So Anne and then Evelyn. Anne, why don't you take this next section? Anne, you can unmute though, because I don't know if we can hear you. Anne Brandt.
There you go. Oh,
Okay.
There you go.
When I came to the well today, I prayed, Adonai, God of my master Abraham, if you truly intend to clear the way on which I am going, here I am at the water fount. When a young woman comes out to get water, I will say to her, please give me a drink of water from your pitcher. If she answers, go ahead and drink, and I will draw water for your camels too, let her be the one you have designated as the wife for my master's son. Before I had finished rehearsing my thought, Rebecca came with a water pitcher on her shoulder and went down to the well to get water. I said to her, please give me a drink. She quickly lowered her pitcher and said, drink, and I will water your camels too. So I drank, and she gave water to the camels too. I asked her, whose daughter are you? And she answered, I am the daughter of Bethuel, son of Nahor, and Milcah. Then I put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her wrists. I knelt down in worship of Adonai, and I praised Adonai, the God of my master Abraham, who had led me on the right path to get the daughter of my master's brother for his son. And now, if you mean to treat my master with faithful kindness, tell me, if not, tell me, and I will turn in another direction. Shall I continue?
Yes, we're going to go through to 58. A little bit more.
Laban and Bethuel responded by saying, this matter has emanated from Adonai. We cannot answer you one way or another. Look, Rebecca is before you. Take her and go, and let her be your master's son's wife, as Adonai has decreed." When Abraham's slave heard their words, he bowed low to Adonai and brought out silver and gold objects and articles of clothing and gave them to Rebekah and to her brother and mother. And to her brother and mother, he gave precious gifts. So he and the men with him ate and drank and stayed overnight. When they got up in the morning, he said, "Send me off to my master." Her brother and mother said, "Let the girl stay with us another few days, 10 perhaps. Afterward she may go." But he said to them, "Do not delay me. Now that Adonai has cleared the way for me, send me off and let me go to my master." They answered, "Let us call the girl and see what she has to say." So they called Rebekah and asked her, "Will you go with this man?" And she said, "I will go."
Okay, that's where we're stopping for another little bit question. This is a complete repetition. Why do you think this is repeated? Story of Abraham and sending Eliezer off. Karen?
I was just going to say, I think there's actually a note about this. I think in the book that it's showing that it's divine, sort of divine will. It's like meant to be. That he keeps repeating this story of like, I prayed to Adonai that this would happen. And then this happened. And I think the repetition of that shows that it was, like I said, it was meant to be. They sort of it's getting that buy-in from the family.
Okay, so he's really selling it to the family. And the thing that always strikes me when we talk about this is that Abraham sent off a slave. Now he's one of his best, most important slaves, but he's a slave that he sent to accomplish all this, which is pretty interesting, I think. Yeah. So we're going to, because we're doing really well, we may actually make it to the last part.
Nancy, wait a second. Who
Yes.
would he have sent if not Eliezer? He was the head of Abraham's household.
Well,
What it said earlier on.
Yeah.
His wife was dead. He had no other kids.
Well, he did. He had sent him away, but yes, he has Ishmael.
Right. But he had no other kids living with him. He had to send a slave or a member of his household.
Right, and he obviously didn't want to make the trip or couldn't make the trip.
He was 100 and how old?
He's not dead yet because he's still pretty active.
Right.
It's just a curious thing, and there is a midrash that Eliezer did his task, but was very hurt because he had a wonderful daughter who would have made Isaac, he thought, a wonderful wife, but she was a Canaanite. And therefore, here Abraham has banished Canaanites from Isaac's wife. So it's an interesting midrash. It's an old one. All right, so we're going to finish up this piece of the story, just a few more verses, verses 59 to 67.
Evelyn, did you indicate an interest in reading? If not, I'll give it to
Sure, I'll
Flo.
read.
Okay, great. Evelyn, and then if we
I'll
get to the
read.
last
But
section.
I
it'll
wanted
be
to
Flo.
say,
Thank you.
but I wanted to say it was really interesting that they asked their daughter if she wanted to go.
Yes.
I mean, they might have sent her anyway, but they did give her a choice, which is kind of empowering.
It is. You're right. Thank you.
And I was also going to say, I think it's great that she said, "I will go." This is an adventurous woman. She's never met this.
Right.
She doesn't know where she's going, but she is ready for the challenge. So.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
I think she might, Karen, I disagree with you. I think she might have not been enthusiastic. She might have also said, we don't even know what the tone of the voice is. I'll go. I will go reluctantly, but I will go. Especially because of what the slave was saying and that it was directed by Adonai.
Well, I thought that it was an adventure because I mean he gave her gifts, he gave her parents gifts, and it's really far away, and I think she was curious and interested in who else is she going to marry, maybe.
But I think you're right. She's an adventurous.
And she's a very strong figure. We will find out later.
She is a strong woman.
Yes.
I was struck by the fact that she used the exact right words, which meant, that it had been predetermined or God inspired or,
Well, and apparently God sent an angel along with Ezekiel.
That's right.
Right.
Don't forget the angel. Those are important.
That's true. Where was the angel? They don't mention him there.
Just
there.
once. Just
one time, right?
Yeah. But you got to admit, it's kind of a great story, especially in the days of women today, in the day of women empowerment. Okay. All right, let's have Isaac and Rebecca meet, and then we're going to have a little bit more discussion. It's verses 59 to 67.
Then they sent their sister Rebekah off with her nurse, with Abraham's slaves, and with his men, bestowing this blessing upon Rebekah. Sister, may you become thousands of myriads. May your descendants take possession of the gates of their foes. Rebekah and her servant girls got up and mounted the camels and followed the man as the slave took Rebekah and went off. Now Isaac was coming from the approach to Be'er Lahai Roi, for he was living in the area of the Negev. Going out toward evening to stroll in the field, Isaac looked up and saw camels coming. And Rebekah looked up, seeing Isaac. She got off the camel and said to the slave, "Who is this man striding in the field coming to meet us?" "He is my master," said the slave. Taking a veil, she covered herself. The slave then told Isaac all he had and got her into the of his mother Sarah. He took her and she became his wife, and he loved her. Thus did Isaac take comfort after the death of his mother.
So,
yes.
Yeah, there's a lot that happens in this little piece. What is the impression we have when Isaac and Rebekah see each other? What are their feelings?
Love at first sight.
Yeah, love at first sight.
That's what it kind of feels like, doesn't it? Yeah. So it says here, I got a lot of questions on this one when I looked at it. Isaac is living in the Negev. Where did that come from? What's he doing in the Negev, and how did he come home at just the right time? That's a curiosity to me, a question, something that just doesn't quite make sense. And how does he marry her? What is that, the ceremony sort of? What does he do?
He beds her.
Yes, he takes her where?
His mother's tent.
He takes her into his mother's tent, and they are married.
That's how they marry.
Yeah, and it says the death of his mother. Now, when I did my research a little bit for this, the other thing is, who's missing in this piece of the story? Who is
Abraham. Abraham.
Yeah, where's Abraham? He is not here, and this is his home. We have no idea where Abraham has gone to.
But is this Abraham's home or is this Isaac's home?
Well, Sarah's tent to me implies that this is where Abraham and Sarah lived.
No, it doesn't say Abraham and Sarah's tent. It says Sarah's tent, and she may very well have had one at her son's place.
Yeah,
Well-
maybe they had separate tents.
Maybe they had separate tents. But remember, Eliezer is, and that's the other thing that's curious. Eliezer is sent by Abraham. He is Abraham's slave. And when he comes back, he says to Rebecca, Isaac is my master. So there is a curiosity. I don't have an answer, but there is definitely a lot of curiosity here of what is going on. And we don't have good answers to what has transpired. Now, according to one midrash that I read, is that when Sarah died, the tent walls came down. Remember, the tent was always open for visitors. And until Rebecca came, the tent was not opened again. So it was kind of interesting, I thought. So I think we're doing well. It's 8. I usually plan for an hour and 15 minutes. If you're good with that, we're going to go on, unless you have more questions, and take a look at this very curious end, chapter 25, verses 1 to 18. It's pretty short, and if we have a reader, do we have it on screen?
We have, Flo has offered to read this one.
Okay. All right, we have a reader, and here we are with this very curious thing that we never read.
Yeah, and if I had known all these names were here. Abraham went on and took a wife named Keturah. She bore to him Zimram, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. Jokshan begot Sheba and Dedan, and Dedon's sons were Ashurim, Ushim, and Leumim.
That's fine.
Midian's sons were Epher, Hanuch, Abida, and Elda. All these were Keturah's sons. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Abraham gave all that he owned to Isaac, but to the sons of Abraham's concubines, Abraham gave gifts while he was still alive. And while he was still alive, he sent them away from Isaac eastward toward the land of Kedem. So once again, he's disposing of kids so they don't threaten Isaac.
There's a little more here if we can bring it up.
Okay. These are the years of Abraham's life. He lived 175 years. Abraham breathed his last and died in good old age, full of age, and was gathered to his people. His sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah, facing Mamre, in the field of Ephron, son of Zor the Hittite, the field that Abraham had bought from the Hittites. There Abraham and his wife Sarah were buried. After the death of Abraham, God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac lived near Beer Lahai Roi.
Keep going. We have a little bit more.
This is the line of Ishmael, son of Abraham, born by Hagar, the Egyptian Sarah's slave, to Abraham. Here are the names of Ishmael's sons in their birth order. Ishmael's firstborn, Nebaioth, Keder, Adbeel, and Mibsam. Mishma, Duma, and Masa. Hadad and Tema, Jetur, Naphish, and Kedma. These then are Ishmael's sons, and these are their names by their villages and encampments. 12 princes by their tribes, which is, foreshadowing the 12 tribes. Interesting.
Yeah.
And these are the years of Ishmael's life, 137. Then he expired and died and was gathered to his people. They occupied the area from Havilah to Shur, which is near Egypt on the way to Ashur. He settled in the presence of all his kin.
Okay, any thoughts here?
Why do they list all the names?
I don't know, other than to show Abraham's next adventure of children. And there are very controversial beliefs that Keturah was actually Hagar returned to Abraham. And then there are an equal number that say, no, it was not Hagar, it is a new wife. So you're gonna find both, because no one knew an answer. And where does Ishmael come after all that? That he pops back in. It is the most curious end. And at the end of our Torah portion, we have a poem, which is really beautiful. And we have it on the screen. Before we read it, are there any questions?
Yes, Nancy, I put into the chat. When the name Midian showed up, I went straight to Midianites and Jethro. I'm assuming that could be a possibility, you know, a few generations later, but that's the first thing that came to my mind, Midianites.
Right, Midian and Midianites.
Yeah. Who knows?
And Brant, looks like you have a question or a thought.
Yeah, with Abraham taking a wife at that point, it kind of reminded me of King David, who took Abishag, except that we didn't hear anything about King David having children with Abishag. All she did was warm his old bones.
Yes.
But it seems to be a pattern that these men just can't be alone.
Yeah, they weren't too independent. Any other thoughts? Okay, so I want to share with you this poem. It is so interesting. Ishmael. I was 13 and I remembered the music and my mother whispering, why such a party when it is only a weaning? And the smell of lamb and the hand drums and the involuntary sound coming from my own throat in the firelight. And I knew my little brother was now my rival, but God was still good to us. Isaac. And I was 3, and I remember staring out in the dark of the morning and seeing 2 shadows, and then the clear outline of your mother clutching a water bottle, wave in the air as if she were talking to someone, but God was still good to us. Ishmael. And now we stare together into the cave that holds our father. Isaac, our father's bones and his memory in the place before Mamre. Ishmael. And yet I fear for the future. Isaac. Since perhaps the only thing we can do together, Ishmael and Isaac together, is to bury and to mourn. It's an amazing coming together. And what struck me when I read this and when I read the end of the Torah portion is no one else is at these funerals. When Sarah is buried, only Abraham is there. When Abraham is buried, only Isaac and Ishmael are there, no one else. I found that to be very curious. I don't know if anyone else has a thought on that. No? Are we thoughtless at this point?
Well,
Julia?
If they're apart and the only thing they can do together is to bury and mourn their dead, then the death brings them together. that it's death that brings them together and reconciles them when it's obviously too late for the father to see.
Which is so sad in a way.
Mhm.
All right, now I want to share with you one last thing, which is kind of a fun thing. It is a modern midrash. It was put together by Rabbi Paul Kipnis, who's in Camarillo. And this particularly struck me because according to our midrash from long ago, after the binding of Isaac, Isaac never spoke to his father. After the binding of Isaac, Sarah never spoke to Abraham. So that is such a pivotal moment, and it happened in last week's Torah portion. It plays such an important role here. And this is such a great story for a woman. And so I will share this. Sarah is speaking and she says, I remember lying quietly in our tent. Abraham had fallen asleep beside me. My mind drifted back to my favorite memory of the day when 3 guests came to tell me I'd soon be pregnant. After so many years, I actually laughed in disbelief until the source of life reassured me it was true. With Isaac, gave me one of my life's great joys. Suddenly, Abraham began stirring and called out, Hineni, here I am. He began to talk with God. As I often did, I pretended to be asleep to listen in. At first, what I heard made little sense. Though I could only hear Abraham's responses, I sensed that God requested something involving our son Isaac. Abraham's steady voice quivered. I thought I heard him say the word sacrifice. Had the Eternal One just commanded my husband sacrifice our only son? Now, why would God, who has given us Isaac, take this special gift from me now? And without even speaking directly to me, for a moment, I wondered if this was my punishment for our treatment of Hagar. Through cracked eyelids, I saw my husband overcome with sadness. I've never seen him so sad, not even when we were commanded, Lech lecha, go forth, to leave his land and his father's house. So I could see Abraham's face, that he truly believed that God wanted him to sacrifice our son. I wish Abraham challenged God, as he had before Sodom and Gomorrah. But Abraham's eyes burned fiercely, and for the first time he excluded me from contemplating God's message. I felt powerless to insert myself in what had passed between them. Finally, Abraham fell back asleep, though fitfully, as if struggling with the demon. I would give up my life before I would let Isaac be harmed. I would not offer my firstborn for sacrifice. The merciful one who has blessed us with a child would not take him away. I needed air. I staggered outside to think. I walked aimlessly around the camp's altar and spied Abraham's special knife. I trembled as I thought of that knife sliding against Isaac's throat. What was God looking for? Why would God suddenly seek reassurance of our commitment? I remembered God's promise that our offspring would inherit the land and become a great nation. I always assumed that Isaac and his future bride would follow in our footsteps to lead as leaders. I never considered how they would inherit our commitment to serving God. Abraham and I were not getting any younger. If we were to pass on the community responsibility, it would have to be soon. Perhaps it was time for a journey together to meet God on a mountaintop and begin the spiritual leadership to the next generation. My heart began to pound as I realized Abraham had misunderstood God and that God was commanding an offering to transmit leadership to Isaac. A sacrifice of the finest of our flock was called for, not a sacrifice of Isaac. I realized then that the future of our people depended on me. I had to prevent a nonsensical death and secure our continued covenant with God. It was on me. I hoped Abraham would figure this out himself, but in case he did not, I had to intervene. So I went back to bed with my eyes closed. I planned my next step. Abraham got up early, gathered his supplies, and took off with Isaac. He didn't even try to wake me. No explanation, not even a kiss goodbye. As soon as they were gone, I gathered my supplies and took our finest ram. I followed carefully, hiding in the shadows. At dawn on the third day, as they slept, I hurried up the mountain, releasing the ram into the bushes. The rest happened so quickly. Abraham was holding the knife, about to sacrifice Isaac. He seemed to be in a trance. So in my voice, he often called angelic, I said, Avraham, Avraham. That broke the trance. Realizing what he was about to do, he dropped the knife. He looked up, saw the ram I had brought for him to sacrifice instead, and stepped toward it. Relieved at having sacrificed my son's life and grateful at having ensured the survival of my people, I was exhausted. I cried and cried. Then I lay down on the ground for what I sensed would be a long, long sleep. An interesting midrash, because according to midrash from the sages, Sarah never spoke a word to Abraham after the Akedah, and Isaac never spoke to his father again. Thank you all for joining us tonight as we honor the Minyan +1. The victims of that senseless shooting will live forever as long as we remember them. May you be blessed as you go forward. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Nancy. That was beautiful.
Thank you, Nancy. That was